Let us start with something uncomfortable. Racism is not purely about skin color. If you strip it down to its core, racism begins with poverty, not biology, not natural hatred. It begins with economic conditions that create behavioral patterns, and then human pattern recognition does the rest. When a group of people is systematically kept poor for generations, certain outcomes become statistically more likely. Crime rates go up. Education levels go down. Social instability increases. None of this is genetic. None of it is inherent. It is the predictable result of being denied resources, opportunity, and dignity over long periods of time. And here is where the tragic machinery of racism kicks in. The human brain is a pattern recognition engine. It evolved to spot threats quickly. If you see certain behaviors associated with certain groups often enough, your brain creates a shortcut, a profile. This profile is not accurate at the individual level, but it feels true because it is based on repeated observation. The problem is that the observation is real, but the cause is misattributed. People see poverty-driven crime in certain communities and conclude that the people are the problem. They do not see the centuries of economic exclusion that created the poverty in the first place. They do not ask why. They just see what is in front of them and form a judgment. This is how stereotypes are born. They are not pulled from thin air. They are oversimplified conclusions drawn from incomplete data. A person from a poor background is more likely to make desperate decisions. Desperate decisions harm others. Harm creates fear. Fear creates prejudice. And prejudice, over time, hardens into racism. Culture plays a massive role too. Different cultures have different norms, different values, different ways of expressing themselves. When one culture dominates the media, the economy, the institutions of a society, that culture becomes the default, the normal. Everything else becomes the other, the strange, the suspicious. And if a minority culture has developed differently, perhaps in ways that seem less refined or more aggressive from the outside, those differences get coded as flaws rather than adaptations to different circumstances. The image problem is real. Some cultures genuinely have worse reputations than others, not because the people are worse, but because their economic conditions produced visible social problems that get broadcast and remembered. The crime, the instability, the lack of education. All of it gets attached to the group identity rather than the economic reality that produced it. And once that association is made, it is very hard to undo. Education is the great divider here. Poverty limits access to education. Limited education leads to poorer decisions in life. Poorer decisions lead to harm. Harm leads to more prejudice. It is a cycle that feeds itself. Breaking it requires breaking the economic conditions first. You cannot educate your way out of poverty if you are hungry. You cannot make good long-term decisions when you are in survival mode. The brain literally functions differently under conditions of scarcity. This is not an excuse for bad behavior. It is an explanation. Understanding it does not mean excusing it. It means understanding it well enough to actually solve it. Now here is the most uncomfortable part. Everyone is racist to an extent, not in the sense of hatred, not in the sense of wanting to harm others, but in the sense of having instinctive profiles based on appearance. It is how humans are wired. We use visual information to make rapid judgments about safety, trustworthiness, and threat. This is self-preservation. It kept our ancestors alive. You see someone who looks a certain way, and based on your experiences or the experiences of others you trust, your brain makes a split-second calculation. Friend or threat, approach or avoid. Most of the time, this happens beneath conscious awareness. You do not choose it. It happens to you. The moral question is not whether you have these instincts. You do. Everyone does. The question is what you do with them. Do you let them harden into hatred? Do you use them to justify treating people poorly? Or do you recognize them for what they are, primitive heuristics that sometimes get it wrong, and override them with conscious thought? This is the fine line. Racism is justifiable only to the extent that it is based on genuine self-preservation and does not harm, defame, or dehumanize another person. That is a razor-thin line to walk. If you avoid someone because your instincts warn you, but you do not mistreat them, do not spread hatred about them, do not deny them opportunities, then perhaps that is simply human nature operating within acceptable bounds. But the moment you cross from caution into cruelty, you have become the problem. The uncomfortable truth is that pattern recognition based on appearance is not inherently evil. It is a survival tool that sometimes misfires. The evil is in what you build on top of it. The systems, the policies, the ideologies, the active choice to dehumanize. So what is the solution? It is not to pretend we do not see differences. That is intellectually dishonest and psychologically impossible. The solution is to understand why those differences exist, trace them back to their economic and cultural roots, and address those roots rather than punishing the people who grew from them. Racism fades when poverty fades. When everyone has access to education, to stability, to dignity, the behavioral patterns that feed prejudice begin to dissolve. Not overnight. Not completely. Prejudice is stubborn. It lingers in the culture like smoke long after the fire is out. But it becomes weaker with every generation that grows up in a world where the old patterns no longer hold true. So be honest with yourself. You have biases. You make judgments based on appearance. You are not evil for this. You are human. What matters is whether you let those instincts control you, or whether you control them. Whether you use them as an excuse to hate, or as a starting point to understand.